Tai Lung wasn't the real villain of this story. He wasn't even the one who caused the disaster everyone remembers. Because the more you look at his past, the more one uncomfortable truth becomes impossible to ignore. Shifu created the problem long before Tai Lung ever became one. Shifu didn't train Tai Lung. He built him like a project, shaped him like a destiny, and pushed him like a weapon. Every praise, every expectation, every "you're meant for greatness" carved deeper into his mind. And when you raise someone to believe they're chosen, you shouldn't be surprised when they demand what you promised. Everyone blames Tai Lung for snapping, but they forget who fed his ego, who shaped his worldview, and who taught him that power is the only path forward. If Tai Lung fell, it's because Shifu was the one who set him up for the fall. So before we blame the student for becoming a monster, we need to ask the question nobody ever dares to ask: what if the real mistake was Shifu himself? Shifu didn't just train Tai Lung, he engineered him. From the moment he found that little snow leopard cub, Shifu poured every ounce of ambition, pride, and unhealed pain into raising him. But instead of raising a balanced warrior, he raised a weapon. Every success Tai Lung achieved wasn't celebrated as growth. It was treated like proof that he deserved greatness. Shifu kept pushing him to be faster, stronger, sharper, because deep down, he wanted a student who could finally validate his own legacy. And Tai Lung felt that pressure. He learned that his entire value came from winning, achieving, conquering. Love wasn't unconditional. It had a price tag labeled "Become the Dragon Warrior." And when a kid grows up believing their worth depends on a title, a destiny, or some prophecy someone else pinned on them, they stop seeing right and wrong. They only see the goal. By the time Tai Lung became a master, he genuinely believed he was owed the Dragon Scroll because Shifu had trained him like someone preparing for a coronation, not a life. So when Oogway rejected him, it wasn't just a no. It was the collapse of an identity built over years, an identity Shifu created. And instead of guiding him through that pain, Shifu froze. He didn't comfort him, didn't talk to him, didn't step up as the father figure Tai Lung thought he was. That silence was the first real heartbreak of Tai Lung's life. In his mind, the person who shaped him for this destiny suddenly abandoned him at the exact moment he needed reassurance. That's why Tai Lung's anger wasn't random or villainous. It was the emotional collapse of someone who realized his entire childhood had been built on expectations he could never question. The tragedy is, Tai Lung wasn't broken by rejection. He was broken by the person who taught him to tie his self-worth to that title in the first place. And that person was Shifu. Tai Lung didn't fall because he was evil. He fell because everything he believed about love, destiny, and purpose shattered in one moment. This wasn't a classic villain origin. It was the emotional collapse of a kid who grew up thinking he was chosen, only to learn that he was never chosen at all. And the heartbreaking part is that Tai Lung didn't invent that belief. Shifu built it. He raised Tai Lung like a prodigy, praised him like a savior, pushed him like someone who had a divine destiny waiting. So when that destiny was denied, Tai Lung didn't just lose a title. He lost the meaning behind his entire life. And what makes it worse is that Shifu wasn't just his master. He was the closest thing Tai Lung ever had to a father. That's why the rejection cut so deep. This wasn't about the Dragon Scroll. This was about a son waiting for his father to fight for him, defend him, tell him, "You're still enough even without the scroll." But Shifu didn't say anything. He froze, terrified, ashamed, confused, and Tai Lung saw that silence as betrayal. In his mind, Shifu didn't just step aside. He abandoned him. That's the moment the bond broke. That's when Tai Lung stopped being guided by ambition and started being controlled by pain. So when he attacked the valley, it wasn't a power trip. It was a scream for validation. A way of forcing the world to give him the worth Shifu taught him to chase. And when Shifu finally confronted him, Tai Lung didn't rage like a monster. He lashed out like someone confronting the person who hurt him most. That fight wasn't master versus student. It was father versus son, both dealing with years of fear, guilt, and expectations that were never spoken out loud. Tai Lung didn't fall because he wanted destruction. He fell because he never learned who he was without the destiny Shifu shaped for him. Shifu didn't set out to create a villain. He set out to raise a legend. But here's the truth nobody in the movie says out loud. Shifu never took responsibility for the expectations he built. He trained Tai Lung with intensity, discipline, and obsession. Not because Tai Lung needed it, but because Shifu needed to prove he could raise a dragon warrior. He was trying to impress Oogway, protect the valley, redeem himself, and maybe even fill the emotional hole left from his own past. And Tai Lung, desperate for approval, absorbed all of that pressure like a sponge. He didn't question the path, he walked it because Shifu lit it for him. But here's the turning point. When Oogway denied Tai Lung the Dragon Scroll, Shifu didn't just lose a student. He lost control of a story he thought he was writing. And instead of stepping up and saying, "This is my fault, I shaped this belief," he froze. His silence in that moment wasn't discipline, it wasn't wisdom, it was fear. Fear of admitting he had pushed Tai Lung too far. Fear of acknowledging that he had built a destiny around a kid who trusted him. Fear of confronting his own failure as a teacher and as a father figure. And that silence became the spark that lit everything on fire. Tai Lung didn't hear guidance. He didn't hear comfort. He didn't hear a plan. What he heard was, "If Oogway doesn't believe in you, then neither do I." Shifu never said those words, but his silence said all of them at once. And that's the moment the story stops being about destiny and starts being about emotional responsibility. Shifu wasn't wrong for wanting Tai Lung to be great, but he was wrong for never preparing him for the possibility of being rejected, or for telling him that his worth didn't depend on a scroll. A real master teaches balance. Shifu taught ambition, and ambition without balance becomes obsession. So when the valley fell and Tai Lung escaped, and the chaos started, deep down Shifu knew it was because of a truth he never faced. Not that Tai Lung was evil, but that he had created a warrior who never learned how to lose, how to fail, or how to exist without the approval of the man who raised him. And here's where everything finally connects. When Tai Lung returns, he's not just a villain coming back for revenge. He's a product coming back to confront his creator. And watch Shifu closely in that moment. He isn't surprised. He isn't confused. He isn't even angry. He's guilty. Because deep down, he knows Tai Lung didn't become a monster on his own. He raised him with impossible expectations, molded him into a weapon, and then abandoned him the second Oogway said no. And when they face each other, Tai Lung screams, "You knew I deserved the scroll?" That line isn't ego, it's pain. It's the voice of a child who was taught his entire life that he was destined for greatness, and then was told it was all a lie. And Shifu? He can't even deny it. He just breaks. Because he knows Oogway was right. Tai Lung wasn't the problem. Shifu's blind obsession with creating a dragon warrior is what cracked him. Shifu didn't prepare Tai Lung for failure. He didn't prepare him for rejection. He didn't prepare him for being wrong. He created a legend, not a person. And here's the twist nobody talks about. When Po arrives, Shifu finally does the one thing he never did with Tai Lung. He lets go of control. He stops trying to shape someone into his idea of greatness and starts supporting who they already are. That's why Po wins. Not because he's chosen, but because he's free. So yes, Tai Lung made terrible choices, but his downfall wasn't born from evil. It came from expectations, pressure, and a master who never learned to love without conditions. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more character deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe.